Well, good morning and welcome once again. In case you've just tuned in, it's been a fairly exciting day so far. We've had the Prime Minister land in an emergency landing facility. It's essentially a runway on a highway. You can see the image in the top right of the Prime Minister's plane touchdown in Moran in Assam. We've got many more images. There was an air display as well. The Rafale on the top left, the Air Chief briefing the Prime Minister. On the top right, you've got Dhruv helicopters of the Indian Air Force. You can see Dhruv also landing right beneath me. That was a little while earlier on. The Prime Minister landed in a C-130J Hercules aircraft. That's a big four-engined turboprop. That's on the top. That's on the bottom right of your screen. So he landed in this emergency landing facility at just a little after 10:30 this morning. And then there was a small air display. Interestingly, the fighter aircraft of the Indian Air Force, including the Rafale and the Sukhoi 30 were armed. Usually the Indian Air Force doesn't have, missiles slung under the wings of its aircraft during a display like this. But I think given the location, the strategic significance of this area, there was a real effort at showcasing capability as well. We've been joined by Air Vice Marshal Arjun Subramaniam and Air Marshal Sanjeev Kapoor as well. Thank you both once again for being with us, and Dr. Brahmacharani as well. Air Vice Marshal Subramanian, how difficult, just for a broader audience, is it to operate on a facility like this? Is it any different from landing on an airbase?
Look, when it comes to aircrew training, it all boils down to aircrew training. And when it comes to aircrew training, ultimately, when you're trained for this kind of landing on an emergency landing strip, it is as though you're landing on one lane of a normal runway. And single lane landings for multiple types of aircraft are part of your training process. But having said that, I think more than aircrew proficiency, it is a whole of government approach that is extremely important for facilitating these kind of operations for the military. And in that respect, I think we've risen several notches over the last decade or so for creating infrastructure and an environment for us to be able to operate high-performance aircraft on roads such as this. It means being able to monitor the birds around the runway. It is for creation of additional infrastructure to replenish and turn around aircraft. It is to create roads with adequate LCN numbers to facilitate. So more than the degree of difficulty, it is the creation of an ecosystem that is important for this kind of operation.
All right. Air Marshal Kapoor, your thoughts on what today achieved? The fact that the Prime Minister was there, I found particularly interesting. He didn't need to be there at all, but I think it's, what's the signal there?
Another aspect which I'd like to add to what Air Marshal Subramaniam said. Most of the runways have aids, be it an approach lighting system, instrument landing systems, VORs, and RNAVs in the modern airfields. These facilities are not available on any of these trips. So it's pure as of today is a visual approach and landing, for which the sighting of the runway and alignment and thereafter to put down the aircraft and similarly operate out of this requires absolute factor of visibility which has to be kept in mind. These operations would be limited in case of a bad weather, fog or other conditions for the timing. There is a paper which I was reading in which there's a provision being thought of to carry mobile instrument landing system or other guidance factors for these runways, and also the emergency runway lightings to operate them by night. So these trips, if have to be used by night, there is a provision that is being worked out by which in any of a vehicle or any of aircraft which precedes the actual operating aircrafts, you light up the place to carry on the night operation. There are a few inputs from my side.
All right. Dr. Chelani, could something like this potentially trigger a response from the Chinese? You never know.
Well, China already has such redundancies built into its defenses.
No, I'm talking
but
about
I think we are learning.
I'm talking about a reaction from Beijing. Do you expect a Global Times magazine, online push in terms of an article that, we've noticed what India is doing but India should know, and then they preach down upon us. We see that time and time again.
Well, as you know, Vishnu, Global Times is a propaganda arm of the Chinese Communist Party. What it publishes carries no significance. But I think in terms of our own planning, we are clearly drawing some lessons from Operation Sindoor.
Yep.
Let's not forget that we began Operation Sindoor by targeting only terrorist camps. As a consequence, we lost an aircraft or two. It was only on the third day, on May 10th, that we hit Pakistani air bases and Pakistani air defenses. But the first principle of air warfare is that when you launch the operation, you should first go after the enemy's air defenses, which we didn't. And I think now we're becoming wiser, and this infrastructure push, of course, precedes Operation Sindoor. But I think showcasing this kind of dual infrastructure is very significant because it's an alternative to fixed bases. It serves as a direct backup to this particular airstrip. It serves as a direct backup to the Chaboha Air Force Station and Dibrugarh Airport in a conflict scenario. Fixed runways are primary targets. Highway strips are much harder to disable permanently and can be repaired faster. And let's not forget one other thing, the surveillance and electronic warfare aspect. While primary a runway, these sites are often equipped with mobile radar units and communication links during quote-unquote activation, turning a stretch of road into a temporary command and control node. So there is a larger signaling that is quite significant.
Okay. Air Vice Marshal Subramaniam, this is a capability that's been developed in other... one sec. The question I actually wanted to ask you was this. We keep seeing and talking about Rafales. In fact, we saw Rafales today as well. It comes just a couple of days after, we've given the acceptance of necessity for 114 Rafale aircraft, 25 years after India actually wanted to enhance its capability. We have 36 Rafales. Navy's getting 26 of them. But the numbers we wanted were much more. So it's interesting to see the Rafale over here, I presume from the Hashimara Air Base, which is just quite close by.
I mean to say it's an absolute no-brainer to assume that the Rafale will be the sword arm of the Indian Air Force for several decades to come.
Yes.
Right? And what will determine the capability of the Rafales in the years ahead is not just the platform, but what are the kind of weapons that we are able to integrate with the Rafale over and above the ones that have been contracted for. That holds the key to the potency of the Rafale, notwithstanding its limited stealth capability or notwithstanding the kind of platforms that will be ranged against it.
Right.
But another thing that I wanted to make a point is that this kind of capability, including the Rafale and the Su-30s in the Northeast, will contribute significantly to the outcomes of a short, swift and high-intensity conflict that we keep talking about. And what is it that dictates the outcomes of short and swift, high-intensity conflicts? It's your ability to cause attrition in the shortest possible time, and it is your ability to absorb attacks on your critical infrastructure and your runways and stuff like that. So I think we need to look at this capability through the lens of what it's going to put on the table if we were to be thrust into a short, high-intensity conflict with the Chinese in this area that we call the rest of Arunachal Pradesh, which is RALP.
Air Marshal Kapoor, any thoughts on this massive Indian Air Force order for 140? It's not yet an order, it will be an order, but for 114 Rafale aircraft, what does that mean for the IAF capability-wise? We can see a Rafale landing on the top right-hand side. Yeah, go ahead, sir.
We did G2G contract in 2016. And when we are signing the next deal, which is likely in a few months from now, these are two Indias which are different. The India of 2016 is different from India of 2026. If you see globally, our position has, and militarily has gone up after Op Sindoor. And this is highlighted by the large number of visits by the heads of states in the few months after Op Sindoor, be it the French, be the UK, be the EU heads, the Swedish and the German Chancellor coming. We are expecting the French President next week. So the militarily part is one. The second part is the MRO facility around Hyderabad that has been set up for Safran. The Tata Advanced manufacturing the fuselage, the large MSMEs which began originally for C295, branching off to the other factors, Adani Leonardo helicopter deal, which is likely to have. So as we gather, Rafale has an order of over 600 plus aeroplanes, which their outfit at Bordeaux can hardly take on. So the plan is to shift the assembly lines, the final assembly lines outside France. And India is emerging as one of the top contenders to have the final assembly line of Rafale in this part of the world. So I'm sure these things would be discussed on the sidelines. And we would be having one of the largest numbers of Rafale aircraft flying once these are inducted with a plan to upgrade. And like was told by Marshal Subramaniam, it is going to form a backbone for our operational capability in the years to come. So India would also like to go in for F4, F5 versions, which will help us in our 5th generation and 6th generation as and when we take on. These are all factors, but coming to the brass tacks, Op Sindoor has showcased the capability of this aeroplane. And now with this deal nearly going through in a few months from now, the world will look at India as an aviation manufacturing hub, though not fully, but integrating part to begin with, and thereafter building on our capabilities till we get our own engines.
All right, I thought what we'd do is just play out a couple of animated slides to give you an idea of what this facility is all about. So we'll go through this quickly. It's a highway which is turned into a runway. What is it for? If there is an air war and forward bases come under the threat, then the facility that we just saw could in fact be used by Indian Air Force fighters and other aircraft. The next point shows you exactly how it's actually set up. This is another scenario. We've just drawn up scenarios over here. If there are Indian Air Force planes which are in the air, in operations, and their base has been attacked, for example, or they're running low on fuel, or they've been given permission to land at this diversionary airbase, that's something that they have an option of doing. How does it actually work on the ground? And this is, I found this animated, this AI-generated image to be quite interesting. It's exactly like this. You know, this is what the highway actually looks like, where there's a runway now, and a fighter aircraft would sort of line up and come in to land. As simple as that. They then refuel and then rearm and then disperse. But let's go to the next page, which describes that process. Obviously, the highway would be sealed because under normal circumstances, you know, there are vehicles, there's traffic. It's an NH2 in this case in Assam. That would be stopped and the planes would come in and land. So this has to be secured, this facility. The next page actually talks about what happens after they land or just before. There would be an air traffic control unit which is set up, a mobile air traffic control unit to guide the operation of aircraft into this area. And so then what happens once the planes land? Let's go to the next page where you can actually see a fighter plane landing. You know, it's animated on this particular runway. And then there's an entire process of the engines being hot but refueling can actually take place. So they will taxi to a small dispersal area. Remember, this is not an airport by any means. It's a small dispersal area. Missiles and bombs are loaded from mobile units. The aircraft will be refueled even with its engines running. It's called hot refueling. Not easy to do. Safety concerns, but they practice it all the time. The pilot will be in the cockpit. The turnaround will take place in minutes, and the idea is to fly off and continue fighting in the event of war. Back to combat. Easier said than done, but that's what the primary goal is over here. So let's just go back to Air Marshal Subramaniam one more time. It's fascinating what this is meant to do, but it's not easy at all to do what I discussed. In the context of modern warfare, to go to a divert field, hot refueled, rearm, refuel, do it in minutes, and then take off. It's actually, it requires a great deal of precision and practice.
Absolutely, Vishnu, and that is entirely dependent on the quality of training. And the quality of training in the Indian Air Force over the last decade has been scaled up significantly to target precisely these kind of contingencies. I mean to say, I recollect when we were growing up in the fighter fleet, landing on single lanes, etc., came fairly ahead in our flying training syllabus. Once we got our ops day status, that's when we did these kind of things. But I'm sure right now the training syllabi for in advanced fighter squadrons includes these things from a very early stage of the operational training. So I think the Air Force of today is a world-class Air Force when it comes to capability, and the capability of air crew, the capability of air traffic controllers, the supporting services, as well as logistics, and the weapons trade. They're all significantly higher than what it was about a decade ago. And I think that is what has facilitated the ability to conduct such operations with ease across the length and breadth of the country.
Sure.
So
All right,
you're
gentlemen, I'm
absolutely-
just going to ask you to pause for a moment. We've got some other news coming in, some breaking news.